What's up, everybody? Jordan Stewart here from Vover. Thanks so much for tapping into the Vover original show. Just a reminder that if you want to drop your opinions about the episode or respond to the host and guests with your voice, go and download the Vover app wherever you get your apps. Vover, voice over everything. Enjoyed the show.
It's time to level up with Dr. Mondo. Vover. What is good, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Level Up with Dr. Mondo. This is an episode where I'm just going to grab the mic and talk to you if you can handle that for about 12 to 15 minutes of me just giving you my hot take, my hot analysis from the perspective of a mental health expert on what we're seeing happening in our culture. There's a giant shift right now that's occurring in how we talk about mental health in this country. In particular, how we talk about it in professional sports. And I can't help but notice the spectrum of reactions and responses that athletes like Naomi Osaka, Simone Biles, all the athletes that have come out and talk about their mental health, all the athletes that have, in their words, prioritized their self-care and prioritized their holistic health by stepping back from competing. Ryan Garcia and all these athletes, as they prioritize their mental health, they're doing it knowing that there's going to be a variety of responses that they'll get. It's almost predictable now. You know, we saw with Simone Biles, her withdrawing from competition in the middle of a competition on the biggest stage for her, and arguably one of the biggest stages in the world sports, the Olympics. Her doing that now creates what we know is going to be a predictable response. There's going to be people on one side that are very supportive of Simone. I would count myself in that category, of course, as a mental health therapist and expert in this field who, of course, my career is dedicated to helping people feel more comfortable advocating for their needs, more comfortable talking out loud about anxiety, depression, internal struggles. So I'm going to be on that side of being very supportive of her. But then there's others that are on the opposite side. And that opposite side tends to be one where she's heavily criticized. And the idea really is that, this is selfish. You're doing a disservice to your teammates, to your country, by not competing and putting your own needs above the needs of the team and the country that you're representing. Like most things in the United States, we fall into this dichotomy of pick a side, for it or against it. It's not a surprise to me that that same dichotomy has revealed itself in how we react to not just athletes, but people prioritizing their mental health. And I say people because Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka and Ryan Garcia, they're the folks that we have the opportunity to weigh in on because they're in the public eye. But these are shifts and changes that are happening on a local level as well. I guarantee there are people now, you could argue whether it's a result of some of these athletes or it's just part of the shift in the movement. There are people now who are calling into work and taking mental health days at more frequent rates than what we saw a decade ago. We never would have dreamed of a professional athlete. We never would have dreamed of a boxer who's arguably one of the toughest in his sport, saying, I need to take some time off and prioritize my mental health because my battle with anxiety is getting the best of me right now. I need to postpone a fight. We never would have thought we would have heard such a thing. We never would have thought someone in the middle of an Olympic competition would prioritize their mental health and bow out of the competition, let alone arguably, and she called herself the greatest of all time. And we, as a peanut gallery, have often affirmed her in such a way as the greatest gymnast of all time. We never would have thought that we'd be at a time when these things are happening, but they are. They're happening in professional sports. They're happening at your job. In this episode, really, I just wanted to dive into helping you make sense of, at least from my perspective, why we see such this dichotomy of responses, for it or against it, critical or empathetic. When Simone Biles withdrew from the Olympics competition, prioritizing her mental health, not backing down and saying over and over again, it was not physical, it was a mental health related concern. I believe it was a defining moment in our history that we will look back at, because it's a defining moment in our cultural values. There's a saying that says, show me your checkbook, show me your online bank account statement. Let me see where you spend your money. And let me see your calendar. Let me see where you spend your time. I'll tell you, based on those two things, what you value. Our values are something that we often bullet point objectively out and say, this is what I will stand for. We do it as people. We do it as a nation. But values are really determined based on our actions. And anytime you see a wrestling of sorts in this way that we have with the public reaction to athletes prioritizing their mental health, to me, it says that there is a shift in a crossroads of values that are bumping up against one another. And our culture currently is having to reckon with that. On one side, there's a traditional value in the United States for competition. Winning at all costs. Winning by any means necessary. That's one side of the values that we know. We've internalized that competition is enforced in our economic structure and how we compete to climb the corporate ladder, how we compete to generate more revenue, how we compete to move into bigger and larger homes, how we compete to drive bigger and faster cars. Competition is something that is not only tolerated, it's promoted in the United States of America. And yet, there is an emerging priority that we're putting on mental health. And it forces our culture to have a bit of a reckoning with our values, because on one hand, we don't necessarily have to make them mutually exclusive, but it feels like we do. We feel like, on one hand, if we value competition, how in the world can we say we value competition, we value being the best, we value winning at any cost, and yet we also support this priority, this objective that we have of being compassionate, empathetic towards people advocating for their mental health needs? How do we hold both in separate hands without destroying the body in which that holds it? That body is our country right now. Our country is at odds with the right hand holding compassion and empathy for Naomi Osaka, Ryan Garcia, Simone Biles, and the left hand saying, show up and do what you said you do by any means necessary. If there's any distress you're suffering from, get stronger. Don't give in to your weakness. You could call this an old narrative versus a new narrative. You can call it whatever you want to. To me, this is our culture reckoning with competing values. Which one's going to win? I think I understand. I don't think. I know I understand the competitive side. You know, I grew up playing sports, and to me, there was something exciting and fun about digging deep. Digging deep. Have run marathons. Just signed up for another marathon this December. Please pray for me. One of my running friends reminded me there's no couch to 26.2 app. So I'm going to need your prayers and support as I get off the couch and get ready for a marathon this December. Part of what I love about marathons is there's many opportunities in the marathon to face your own internal demons, so to speak. There are many opportunities to discover parts of yourself, hopeful parts, ecstatic parts, pessimistic parts, scared parts. And the journey of running is to continue to put one foot in front of the other while you encounter those parts and not get too lost in that moment. Someone on the competitive side may say running is a form at a long distance frame of mental toughness. It builds mental toughness to be able to push through those barriers. Someone that values competition says maybe, hey, if you do whatever it takes to show up and push through those internal cues, then you're really a true competitor. I'd also say you're probably at our core, while it's implicit and never explicit, there's also a part of us that feels a bit of nationalism and the sense of you're following the American values here by being tough and showing up and pushing through. So when people are critical of athletes for, in their words, and I don't agree with this, but in their words, prioritizing their own needs over the needs of the team, not being mentally tough enough, I understand that perspective. I don't fully agree with it, and I probably don't even partially agree with it, but I get where it comes from. But again, we're at a reckoning. And what athletes have done by prioritizing their mental health, they'll never fully understand the impact that it's having on everyone else. But to me, this is the strategy that we've had to borrow from all along. We needed people in high and powerful places with platforms to prioritize their mental health if we wanted other systems, if we wanted other people to do the same in their own lives. I realize by advocating for that effectively, whether we like it or not, we are compromising a bit of our allegiance to the value of competition in order to make space for the value of humanity. And there's a part of me that mourns that loss. Just like anyone, I love the Mamba mentality of Kobe Bryant. I love Michael Jordan and studying the psychology of his mindset to push through anything. And yet, on the other hand, I'm so proud and so happy and so appreciative of Naomi, Ryan, and Simone for making the decisions that they've made to prioritize their mental health, to display the self-respect necessary to make this a value that others in our society begin to internalize for themselves. If I had to choose between the two values at this crossroad, competitiveness and empathy, compassion, I would say that there are some things that we simply stop the game for. Physical injuries are one. Mental injuries, mental struggles should be another. The value that I have in competitiveness can take a backseat at times when the person that's out there competing says, I have enough respect for myself to take this moment and to pause. I'll tell you, as someone that's not very good at listening to my own internal cues, despite telling others to do it, these young folks have really motivated me to start listening to my own internal cues, my own internal limits at times. I no longer am pushing through those limits that I encounter like I used to. There were times where I would do anything to finish what I said I was going to start and finish. But I'll tell you now, there are times where, as the cultural narrative shift in our country around mental health, as we see leaders prioritizing their mental health and taking breaks for balance, breaks for their own internal distress to be eased, there are times where it's rubbing off on me. And I'm someone in this fight who's urging all of us to do it. What kind of impact must it be having on society at large? If at any point in this, it feels like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, I am. And that's a larger rant I have. You know, it's okay to value multiple things, even if they conflict. I will still value competition. There's something about it that I love. It's why I love sports. It's why I love a lot of things in life. But I will also value empathy and compassion for people's mental health. And if it came down to it, and I had to pick one or the other, I'll pick empathy and compassion every day of the week. Our culture is at a reckoning, a time of reckoning with values. We see it in the discourse and the response to our athletes standing up and prioritizing their mental health. I hope this podcast gave you an opportunity to be more reflective of which values you are living out. Not just talking about, but what are you exerting in your actions? Where are you spending your time? Where are you spending your money? That dictates what you truly value. Follow me on Instagram at Dr. Mondo. You could also follow at Cheat Code, my foundation, where we're looking to end stigma around mental health struggles and increase access for everyone to experience transformational mental health care. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time. It's time to level up with Dr. Mondo.